Good morning, Appalachia. Good morning. So, since we are in a room full of Methodists, I'm going to try an experiment. Okay. So, making disciples of Jesus Christ for uh, a room full of good Methodists. Yes. Making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. Our mission, our calling as United Methodists. But how do those of us like myself who serve in the hills and the hollers of Central Appalachia fulfill this mission when the vast majority of our churches suffer from a lack of both human and financial resources? How do we do ministry, do effective ministry in the context of our communities, which exist in a county like mine, where I serve six? That's right, six. I always love the reaction that I get when I say that. Where I serve six very small, very rural churches. A county that is one of the most impoverished and exploited in the country. A county where 1 in 3 of our residents exist in poverty. A county where the vast majority of our children are going hungry, where food insecurity and lack of access to adequate health care are the norms, not the exception. Where we lead the nation in per capita overdose deaths of both fentanyl and methamphetamine. Where 70% of our land is not owned by us, but by outside corporate interests. Where many of our residents, where there is an epidemic of black lung disease among those who are digging their own graves 3 miles underneath a mountain just to make a living, over half a century after legislation was passed that was meant to eradicate the disease. A place where hope is our most scarce commodity. But I want to share with you this morning a hopeful vision. A hopeful vision for the future of the small, rural Appalachian church and the communities that we serve. A hopeful vision that despite our scarcity, despite what we lack, we can still do the effective good work of bringing about transformation in those communities. Now, I just want to take 1 second of your time and pause because I fully realize that a lot of you probably didn't hear anything that I just said after I said the word hollers. Okay? I get it. So let me take a moment to explain to you just what a holler is and its significance. See, in the Central Appalachian vernacular, holler is how we pronounce the word hollow. Now, a hollow, if you don't know, is simply a hollowed out depression, a low lying depression between two hills that form a narrow valley. And many of us in Central Appalachia call the holler home. We live in these hills and these hollers. Quite appropriate, I think. The irony is not lost on me. that we call the holler home, seeing as how for generations our people have been laid low by outside economic forces. King Coal, who has come in and extracted all of our resources and all of our wealth, along with our humanity, our dignity, our somebodyness, our personhood, leaving us sunken, depressed, living lives of insignificance in a valley of despair, nailed on a cross of economic exploitation. And guess who helped put us there? Guess who handed us over to those powers and principalities? The church. A church that has for well over a century been complicit in our exploitation, either by silence, not saying anything, not speaking to our conditions, or preaching a very, what I like to call, a company gospel. A gospel that says, yeah, you're suffering right now. Yeah, you're going through extreme hardship, but that's okay. It's God ordained. Deal with it. Deal with it, because in the next life, in the life to come, God's going to make it all right. You've got a reward coming. You got pie in the sky, baby. It's coming. In this sense, our people, can be counted among those whom Salvadoran Jesuit Ignacio Ellacuría calls the crucified peoples of history. The wretched of the earth, whom Howard Thurman said exists with their backs against the wall, asking the question, what does the religion of Jesus have to say to us? What is the good news of God's kingdom for those of us who exist in the holler? Perhaps, just maybe, the answer is found in a reimagining of the gospel, a reinterpretation of the good news of God's kingdom on our own terms and in our own context. A gospel that lifts up and recovers our people out of the low places, a good news that redeems our hollowed out communities, that restores our humanity, our dignity, our personhood, our somebodyness. A gospel that accomplishes through and by God's grace communal salvation, communal wholeness. The grace of God made manifest. So, we began to think in this 6-point charge where I serve in very rural Appalachia. We need to develop a platform to incubate this unique contextual understanding of the gospel. So we have begun the process of reorganizing our faith community as a discipleship pathway. Not a discipleship pathway as part of the church, as part of what you do at church, but a discipleship pathway that is the church. combining elements of the Wesleyan class meeting. Now, if there are any non-Methodists among us today, just think small groups. Combining elements of that along with base ecclesial communities that the Roman Catholics brought about well over half a century ago in Latin America that gave rise to very liberative expressions of the faith. And elements of new monasticism, which is centered on living in intentional community. Reimagining Sunday mornings and reorganizing Sunday mornings along the lines. Did I mention that I serve very, very small churches? Sunday mornings, not so much as a traditional worship service, but as a small group gathering. Not where they get preached at by me, but where they and I enter into a discussion on the biblical texts, where it's a dialogue that begins to bubble up and formulate this contextual understanding of the good news of God's kingdom. One in which they begin to see themselves in the text. And more importantly than that, they begin to see their community within the text. And they begin to see like God in the Exodus. They begin to see the suffering of their people, of our people. And like God in the Exodus, they begin to hear the cries of the people, which sparks a passion for justice to come in the southern coal fields of West Virginia. And where we connect that passion to our God-ordained purpose. Where our passion drives us to come alongside God and co-mission with God to bring about transformation in these communities. Yeah. Those of you who are familiar with new monasticism know that it is predicated on living by a rule of life. You covenant to live by a rule of life. And that rule of life also drives you to formulate a missional focus in these communities. I don't have to tell you, I'm literally preaching to the choir. But those of us of the Wesleyan tradition, we have such a rule of life baked in our DNA. Do no harm. Do good. Practice the spiritual disciplines. So we are using that rule of life, the general rules of Methodism, to connect that passion with that purpose to develop a missional focus in each individual church, in each of those individual communities that they serve. Where it doesn't have to be anything elaborate, anything great, but just something that they are passionate about that can bring about change and change people's lives and impact people's lives for the gospel in the communities that now they are coming alongside. Not doing ministry to or for, but ministry with, in solidarity with their communities. And then we bring it all home, right? With this newfound passion and purpose that has grown out of this contextualization and reimagination of the good news of God's kingdom, well, then we get about doing the work of the church. we get about doing real effective ministry in those communities. Ministries that meet community need, that derives from the community, what they tell us they need, not what we think they need. And the result of that is a new, reordered society, a society grounded in love, a society where all forms of exploitation end, where the flourishing and the thriving of life in all of its forms are the top priorities of everyone. A distinctly Appalachian vision of God's kingdom. Beloved community that has the potential to radically transform our situations. Now, I am not standing up here in front of you today naive enough to think that this somehow, some way is going to save the small, rural Appalachian church as we know it. As we know it. But I do think, in fact, I am convinced that it does create the space and create the opportunity to birth something new, which in turn creates the opportunity for our communities to experience rebirth. And our people, which have been in the low places for so long, to experience real resurrection. Now, here's the thing. You may not be serving or from Appalachia. You may not exist in the holler. But I guarantee you, whatever your context, wherever you are serving, there are people who are classified among those crucified peoples of history. The people with their backs against the wall. And they are desperately asking the question, what in the world does your religion have to say to us? What difference does it make in our lives? So, as I leave you this morning, just ask you the question, what is your particular contextual holler? And who are the people in it that need the good news? And what does the good news of God's kingdom, the gospel of Jesus Christ, have to say to them? The people that need hope. So what does that, what hope does that conjure within you? And what hope might it conjure in the communities you serve? Thank you so much.